This is the story of Asparagus Soup. During the winter, the snow collected in the mountains, and all the land was covered by a thick blanket of snow. In the spring, the snow melted, and there along the banks, stashes of asparagus that have grown in the same spot for generations began to sprout and lift their stalks towards the sky. I collected this wild asparagus so we could make asparagus soup together today. Wild asparagus will vary in color, with some of the stalks a deep purple and others a vibrant green, an indication they are rich in nutrients and minerals. Some of the stalks are pretty thick, but that will be okay because we will puree them and turn them into a creamy, wonderful, delicious asparagus soup. We will then proceed with cleaning and rinsing our stalks, and after that's all done, we will separate the tips from the stalks. The tips have these delicate, wonderful florets. They are tender, and we will reserve them to add a wonderful texture to our soup. The stalks we will roughly chop into 1-inch pieces. We don't need to get too particular on the sizes since they'll be pureed down into a pulp. The 1-inch memory won't be remembered. So there's no need for a particular length. And for now, we'll set our asparagus aside and move on to prepare the other items in our soup. Onions are often the unknown member in any dish. If they weren't there, you would know that something's missing, even if you couldn't put your finger on it exactly. They're kind of like the foundation of a house, unseen, but absolutely critical. These are yellow Texas sweet onions. Now I know that may sound strange that an onion can be sweet, but once we cut these up and saute them with a little bit of butter, they will give out their sweetness, and all the acidity from the onions that may have made us cry as we cut them will be melted away until we have a nice, sweet set of onions sauteed perfectly to add to the foundation of our asparagus soup. Just like the asparagus stems, we don't need to be too particular with chopping the onions as they will ultimately be pureed. So a rough chop like this will do just fine. And we'll go ahead and set these aside with the other items that we've prepared. Next, we'll need to prepare the lemon. This is a handmade juicer that was made by a very close friend. And it's in my very most favorite color, which is seafoam green. And I just love the detail and that it's handmade, and you can see the ridges in the center are absolutely perfect for squeezing citrus fruit. I always like to start by rolling the lemon a little bit, letting the rind put pressure on the inside. I think that helps you get the maximum amount of juice from each of your lemons. I love citrus fruits. They have such pizzazz. They're zesty and sour and sweet, all rolled into one. They have quite the personality. I kind of imagine them like little dancers tip-tapping on your tongue. They have such vibrant and wonderful flavor. The lemon contributes only a small volume to the soup. Only about 2 tablespoons will be fully rendered from this one lemon. And yet, the acidity of the lemon is absolutely key in balancing out the dish. We need to get every last drop because, as you can tell, I love lemon, and we want to make sure that we have the maximum amount of sour zestiness in our soup to let our tongues have little tap dancers that bring wonderful flavor to the dish. So we'll just be extra diligent in squeezing out every last drop. And these wonderful ridges from this handmade juicer are really helpful in getting all of the juice that we need. Now we'll get the garlic ready. This recipe calls for 4 cloves, but you can add more as you like. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Garlic adds a lovely accent and savoriness to any dish. It has this rich warmth that, just like the onion, you might not notice until you really think about it, that the flavor is just not quite right. And that's because it needs a little bit of garlic. And you can add more or less garlic as you like. I know some people are very fond of it, so you could add a whole bulb if you wanted to. We'll cut up our garlic, place it in a little dish so it's ready to pop in conveniently. And this is also a piece of handmade pottery, which I think is really beautiful. Now we need to have some chicken broth for our asparagus soup. And if you wanted to use vegetable broth, you could certainly do that, and that would make this dish vegetarian. I'm using homemade chicken broth, but you don't have to do that. You can use store-bought chicken broth, or even bouillon cubes, or vegetable broth, whatever is easiest and most desirable for you. So get these ready and set them aside. Now we have our Parmesan cheese, which we will measure out. Even though this dish is called cream of asparagus, it doesn't have any cream in it. The only dairy in the dish comes from the Parmesan cheese. And get that ready here. Just put it on a little plate for convenience. And the cheese does add some creaminess to the soup, but its primary purpose is to add salt and kind of a nutty undertone to the soup. And I always like to save a little bit of the Parmesan cheese as a topping when I'm done. I like to sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on my soup, and it serves as a reminder that, yes, indeed, there is some cheese, some wonderful Parmesan cheese in this soup. Now we'll get the butter ready. We're going to use 6 tablespoons of butter. And no, my name is not Paula Deen, although I do have a love affair with butter. We'll get the butter melted, and then we'll add the garlic and the onions, and you're going to want to watch the butter because it goes really fast. If you don't watch it, you could kind of get it burnt, and that's no good. So we'll go ahead and add our onions and our garlic, and we'll want to cook them for about 10 minutes until the onions are completely translucent and the sweetness of our yellow Texas onions has fully come out. Just add our garlic alongside our onions here. Get every last and little drop of our garlic out. Now, the next thing that we're going to need to do is to steam our asparagus florets. We don't want to steam them too long. We want them to have an al dente flavor so they retain that wonderful texture that we're looking for. So we will want to keep our eye on these. Probably only need really a few minutes. We'll pop our top on to capture all that steam. And once they're done, we will immediately drain all the hot water off and place them in a cold bath. This will stop them from cooking, and it will capture that wonderful al dente texture that will be so crucial to our soup. We can just let them sit here in this cold bath as we prepare the rest of our items. And once we've cooled them completely, we can drain them. This colander was made by my friend Byron, and it's a homemade or handmade pottery colander, which I think is so cool and unique. And we can go ahead and set our florets aside. And don't they look so lovely, like little tiny Christmas trees? So after the tips have cooked, we'll go ahead and get our stock in with our onions. We'll add the asparagus stalks, everything that's in there, and we'll go ahead and let it simmer for 30 minutes. And oh my gosh, it already looks so good. So I just like to put a timer on for 30 minutes. The cheese and the lemon juice are the only things we've really left out so far in the florets. Now, once everything has cooked down for 30 minutes, we'll go ahead and prepare to puree our soup. You will need a large bowl to do this, just like this one here. And I like to puree in batches so that I get it extra creamy and extra delicious. And I have a metal blender, which means I can blend right away. If you have a plastic blender, you will need to wait and let the soup cool, and that's okay. Just a thought for you. And oh my gosh, look at how wonderfully creamy this soup looks. It looks so delicious. Now we'll add our lemon juice, our little acid tip tappers on our tongue to liven everything up. And we'll get our cheese and drizzle that in. At this point, you don't even need to have the soup on the burner. The warmth of the soup should be sufficient to melt the cheese and keep everything warm. And then we'll add our florets, our wonderful texture, and get everything together, all in the same bowl. And we'll go ahead and mix it really good. Combine all of those wonderful flavors that we've gathered today for our soup, and just stir everything together. We'll prepare the ambiance for our soup. I think that food is so much more than nourishment. It's how you present and how it looks, as well as how it tastes. And doesn't our soup look so good? I've got ourselves a lovely little napkin, a big wide brim soup spoon. I actually made the bowl, the little black bowl, I made with my own hands, and I made it with a glaze that has, you guessed it, my favorite color, light green, like little star specks, like the universe. It's a pretty shallow bowl, so it won't take too much to start. We will make sure that we get some of those lovely florets in our soup, though, and just dish ourselves a little bit of this wonderful soup to go ahead and try. I've saved some of the Parmesan cheese, and I will go ahead and sprinkle that on the soup and just make it look lovely. I've also saved some fresh dill, and I think in this recipe you could use any kind of fresh herb you like. I think thyme would be delicious. I think a very thin sliver of lemon to remind us of that lemony flavor, that lemony undertone. Dill is also really lovely. It pairs really wonderfully with the asparagus, and I like putting one little tiny branch in. And if I do say so myself, this is a work of art. And let's go ahead and try this wonderful soup. Yes, I will need a napkin, and we'll get that prepared and go ahead and dig into our wonderful soup. Wow, so delicious. Thank you for making soup with me today.